Peace, 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 greetings. So it is officially the Enlightenment and Transformation movie breakdown takeover. So welcome, welcome as we all come into this space. I am Ima Yakira Eden, and I am joined by who wants to jump in first? The dynamic duo. Go ahead.
I go to Maria. I go to Yamina.
And I'm Akuti Yafe.
Yes, so welcome everyone on YouTube. I believe we may also be streaming on, are we streaming anywhere else?
Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook as well. Facebook. Oh, is that the Facebook? So we are really excited. Peace, Master Menelek in the chat. We are really excited for this first episode of what will meet with maybe a 5-part takeover. Like I think we're going about 5 strongs if I have it. 6. Look at that. We're adding more movies as like in every moment. Every moment there's a new movie being added in. So this is the first movie of, many more to come. And so, of course, we are reviewing and talking about, and we're going to kind of want your feedback on Chief Daddy. Okay. What was our favorite song from Chief Daddy?
Moving Mad.
I wish we could lose Yes. Okay, so we're going to jump right in. I think Okoti Amina is going to bring us right on to what's happening and where we're heading.
Peace, everyone. So Chief Daddy is a pretty light film to decipher, but it basically we're following what happens when the patriarch of a prevalent family transitions and what ensues after. So hopefully you all enjoyed the film, got some laughs, but that's basically what happens.
Can you tell us? I wonder. So, I'll jump in and I'll share a little bit, right? I know in the beginning of the film, we could talk about the producer a little bit. This one of the things you may notice is that this film has a Nollywood look, right? But it's like a luxurious Nollywood, right? It's a Nollywood stepped up, right? And it was produced by Ebony Life Films. And, like one of the things I noticed is it looks like an evolution of what we're normally accustomed with when we hear Nollywood. All right. So, there is that layer of very elite, very, lots of cinematography and so on in there. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because of the look, the culture, the costumes as well. I don't know if you could talk about the author and the writer, actually. I think his name was Bode. I cannot pronounce the Nigerian names, but his first name is Bode, and he studied in Britain actually. So I just Bode Asinyandi.
There you go.
She says Nollywood look with Ghanaian actors.
Oh,
yeah.
So to move right into that, so as breakdowns go, we want to know who produced it, who wrote it, which Akoti Maria just shared with us, and what was happening during that time. So the producers of Chief Daddy. Well, first, the movie was released in December of 2018. Mm-hmm. The producer name, or the name that has producer credit, when you look it up, is Temidayo Abudu. And Temidayo Abudu is kind of like, I guess, Nollywood royalty. So she actually comes from, I don't want to say a line. Mosin Mola produced it. Okay, so there's more than one producer on the film.
one of the producers, like she, was 27 at the time, so like really fairly young. And because her mother is like Nollywood royalty, oh, got it. She, give thanks, Chief Yuya. They're sisters. Um, so their mother is Hollywood royalty. So it kind of goes to show like how you keep it in the family, like you kind of teach, it kind of passes down. So that skill of filmmaking, or maybe the love or the passion for filmmaking is in the family. Or it could be just straight on nepotism, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. We especially when we're thinking about how homesteads are run and how families are raised, you show them the skill set. This is what we produce. And so this is just one of the films that has been produced by these filmmakers. They are also from London. So as we get into the film, we'll see the influence of Western culture, the heavy influence of Western culture on this film, and kind of how it's portrayed, how that kind of affects or goes on in Nigeria. So with that being said, what was going on at that time? So there were a few things happening. So I remember in 2018, royal wedding, right? Everybody wanted to know like who was walking down the aisle. Prince Harry and the American girl. They're getting married. So it was, and everybody was paying attention to it. So it goes to show like that influence, that Western culture influence. What's going on in America and the UK, and how can we all get in on it and pay attention to it, and we want to do that too. And that comes across in the film. Like you even hear, if you were able to watch the film, even some of the accents, right? So this is taking place in Nigeria, but there are a lot of British accents. So it's, the heavy influence of, not just Western, but even specifically UK or Britain. And there were some other things, right?
Yeah, I think when you touch on the Olympics, it kind of gave a nod to something we'll cover later on, which is when they're establishing some of the vendors as they're getting vendor quotes, and they're pretty much improvising through these quotes because they're assuming that this family has millions of dollars, and so the funeral home, they're kind of saying, well, yeah, we've got a gold package, we've got a silver package, and then there's bronze. But then there's also an Olympic package. So it's kind of like they were pulling from what was going on at the time to then make up an extra package. So this was going to be the package his family should pay for. It's like that Olympic, just making a connection to what was happening.
Something else to remember is that Nollywood is pretty big. It's like the leading producer of films after Bollywood. Bollywood, they sometimes go back and forth between Bollywood and Nollywood. Hollywood produces about 500 films per year, and Bollywood produces 2,500 films per year. Or Nollywood produces 2,500 films per year. And that's sometimes why you don't see like the character development as you see in Hollywood movies, but you get the humor. Definitely got the humor in this film.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because Justina, that particular character, she actually only came on the scene as an actress a few years prior. But when I was kind of looking at her, like how many films she'd been in, there was about 100. And even though she had only come on the scene like maybe 18 months or 2 years prior. And so it's like 100 films in less than 2 years. Yeah, that's interesting. But I guess that speaks to the production and maybe how few, like the turnover, but also I'm thinking about how many actors and actresses there are being, utilized, because we'll see the same characters in a lot of the films that we've watched.
I think the same is true for many of the actors in this film. One of my favorites is Ini Edo, and like I only know the face. I saw her and I started calling her by the name I know her as Asuka, but she is, also a very prominent um, actress. And I think a lot of the actors and actresses in this film, they all have a lot, like a record, right? They're well known.
Yeah, it was a film of cameos. So, we even see, we're gonna get into it. We even see Castle and Castle. I don't know if anyone else watches Castle and Castle. Put a one in the chat if you know Castle and Castle. But it's another, it's a series. It's a Hollywood series of two lawyers, and they were representing the family. So it was a whole bunch of cameos in this film.
Yeah, and to Amy Akira Eden's point, that could be. I think I remember her last name was Ejiofor because it's the same as Chiwetel Ejiofor, but Justina Cici Ice Cream. That could speak to why she had like 100 films. Maybe this was her come up. She was in it with like a lot of the big wigs, so that could have been her. This was her breakout role. Maybe, who knows?
Yeah. And she was relatively younger as compared to, a lot of the actors and actresses, well, actors, period, who are older. Yeah.
Master Manielek says in the chat, Manielek says, all those, are we going to the chat yet? Yes. All those movies, and the first thing that comes to mind when Nollywood is mentioned is, why are you running? Why are you running? Why are you running? Why are you running? Oh,
Yeah. So let's get into it.
All right. So, we can talk about, we're not going to give you a play-by-play, but one of the first scenes we're going to, we'll talk about the opening scene. One of the first scenes in this film is actually, I guess it sets the stage and the tone for this film because it's all comedy, right? However, there are lots of serious themes in here, right? So the opening scene, we get a vision of Madame Pat in her space, right? She's in her space. She's managing the domestics of the estate and the home of Chief Daddy. And you see her, I think it starts off with her assaulting, I'm going to say, literally assaulting a young man in the film. She's smacking him around, and I know when we initially spoke about this, one of the things we said was, that's very typical in Nollywood films. Like you see a lot of that. But I found it stood out because, maybe it's too early to talk about that, but I found that it stood out because you're assaulting a man, that's the first thing you see, and that's comedy, But we also get a peek into, just her standards and the tight, you can tell that she runs a tight ship in a sense. Everything has to like meet her standard, and eventually you actually see her having a conversation with the chauffeur, and she tries the same thing with him. Like she tries to belittle him, she tries to have a whole conversation, and he kind of put her in her place a bit. So you get to see the dynamics between the servants of the household.
Mm-hmm. I think the first thing she does, she calls him the driver. And he's like, no, get my title right. I'm the chauffeur. I'm not just the driver to just be carting you wherever you need to go. I am chauffeur Donatus, and I'm Chief Daddy's chauffeur. I don't just take you to the market when you snap your fingers. I'm not like all these other minions around here. I actually, have a purpose as well, and I have my domain. You stay in your place, and I'll stay in mine.
Right. Go ahead.
No, I think it also showed a lot about, we're going to see this again, about the social structure, like the different classes and who has hierarchy over whom, and even elder status. Like the man was sleeping on the job, so and she is managing him. But I noticed that in Hollywood films, like whether he's a man or not, if she's older and she is in a managerial position, someone's gonna slap him. So, which is interesting, that would be considered, like Sister Maria said, comedy.
Yeah. I know we started with that scene, but it's like when I looked at my notes, I thought the inspiration for everything that transpires um, began with the eldest son, Damaleri, actually speaking, like he's narrating. And while narrating, it looks like he might be in England, right? Um, and he's kind of looking out of his window and he's watching a family sit down at a restaurant. And the mother and the daughter sit, and the father is doting on his son and spins him around. And he's narrating and saying, family, they say, is everything. And that's like the opening statement to, and it's almost like family, they say. So it's almost like, well, is family really everything? Or is it not? And then it cuts to what's being described. And I think with that piece, it's setting the tone for who are the members of this family? Who is in this house? Who runs this house? So Madam Pat, Miss Pat, she runs the house. And that was made very clear from the opening scene of you don't sleep on the job as security for Chief Daddy's, compound. Um, that's how it opens it up. But I think I agree that tone of abuse and and disrespect, because ultimately that's what it is, right? There's a disrespect that isn't necessary to get your job done, but in a lot of these films that is what's pushed forward. So yeah.
Chief is saying sleeping on the job is standard if there's nothing happening at the moment, because many of those drivers actually double as 24/7 security for the compounds.
Oh,
Like that's,
well, then that's some compromised security. You get to nap, like you better make sure it's secure.
He was the guard. It's like you're supposed to be on watch. Your eyeballs supposed to be open.
He said he was praying.
Yeah, he did.
He was taking in prayers.
But then he admitted I won't do it again. So you were sleeping.
Right.
And I wanted to point out too that even there's a component to that. I wondered whether it contributed to the next scene. I won't say what the next scene is. But hopefully you all watched the film, and if you didn't, I won't spoil it for you. But we see that there, clearly Chief Daddy is living in luxury, opulence, but you see the spread and you see the amount of food being prepared and served to him. One person. So, like I wondered over a period of time, I wondered what would have led to, his transition.
Yeah, like there was some heavy things. You see the food,
heavy, rich
foods. Yeah. And I mean, as the film started, I was like, oh, well, they're getting ready for a party. But it doesn't seem so. That was like normal. That was regular par for the course. This is how we do. And you're right. And I was like, I wonder if that's what it is. Because interestingly enough, just in health wise, like rates of hypertension and different comorbidities and things we see here are rising over there. And it speaks to that, like, oh, we're gonna mimic Western culture, and like like even the foods, like not necessarily like looking at what's healthy to eat. It can take a toll on you, but we don't know why he transitioned. He just did.
Yes, he did. So I'll just open up with, there's the squabble over, am I Chief Daddy's chauffeur or am I everyone's chauffeur, including, and it was chauffeur, right? There was no CH. There was definitely more of an SH and a 4 on the end, just to be clear, okay? And I guess that even leads to the pretense, right? There is lots of pretentiousness in this entire film, perpetuated by everyone. Okay, the side piece becomes the main piece. The adopted daughter, pretends that she's somebody that she isn't. But as Madam Pat and the chauffeur go inside, well, before we even get into that, when Madam Pat approaches Denitis, he's actually on the phone and he is bragging about how he was defending Chief Daddy's honor, right? So he was saying, how dare you, how dare you say anything about him? He told me to put anything I want on my Christmas list, write it down. And I wrote, what was it, a condo? What did he ask for?
Whole one.
A whole condo. So that was his request. And we never got a sense of what Madam Pat's request was, but it was so grand that she would only verbally try to interject what her request was. And you could see that Chief Daddy was actually really irritated by that, because he said, I told you several times, write it down, leave it on my desk. So there was this, like, she's, with almost like shame or humility, like, I want to tell you what I want, but I don't want to write it down. Like, can I just tell you? And the movie like premieres in December. So this is now for now. So even that speaks to, like, he's not getting Christmas lists in August, September, October. He's getting the list now. So even that sets the tone for they get what they want when they ask for it. So as they walk into the dining area, to really have him mitigate such a meaningless argument in the grand scheme of things. And peace, everyone in the chat. I see more and more people are joining. When you really think about it,
we did it. But let's shout them out now. Peace, Chief. Peace,
Chief.
Master Menulek, Aki El Karar, aka Lo the Scholar, Shalom, top tier speakers, and
Manaya.
I said Imanaya. I think that's it. Ra, peace, Rahim. I think that's everybody. And
all
peace
right.
to everyone else in the space and who's not here yet. And peace, Anu Radio.
So what's interesting when you really think about even Chief Daddy's name, which his full proper name is never referenced. At least I didn't take note of it ever being referenced. So in that alone, there's like an objectification of him. He gets no name. He has a title. Yes, it's clear he's the chief. And he has another title, right? It's clear he's daddy. And that's it. And daddy to everyone. The first encounter that we have is him. Well, it's not the first, but early on, it's him with the help coming to bring their squabbles to him. You would think in a hierarchy that wouldn't happen, right? Where he is the chief. Why would the head of the maintainer of the grounds and the chauffeur be bringing their issues to him? So it sets the tone for all that happens next. So they go to do that and discover that he is not alive. And the foolishness ensues. So I'm gonna just open the floor there.
And do they discover, because they fumble through that entire? It is, if he had,
they're oblivious. They're oblivious to it.
It's
right. They come in fighting, squabbling with each other, and neither one of them noticed that the man wasn't moving until the fork drops. He's sitting where they left him. It's like he was just served breakfast. So he comes in and he's just kind of sitting there and not eating. And none of them notice, like, why aren't you eating? Just, she called me your drive. I don't want to take her to the store. Just a whole squabble over this man's recently deceased body. And then when they realize that he's deceased, is that even disrespect for the body?
Fall out.
Pure foolishness ensues.
Yeah, I'm I'm sure it was for comedy, but I was just like, that's not CPR. That's not how you do it.
Exactly.
That's not CPR. That's
Not
not
one ambulance was called.
Right. And I thought about the fact that this is an estate. And so, and the kitchen looked, like almost like a commercial kitchen. So I wondered, where's the defibrillator? Where are, they're trying to find what is that? What were they looking for inside of that little first aid kit?
That was
What
a first aid kit. They needed an AED. They needed a whole AED, like a crash cart, and they went into the
Band-Aids and gauze. I was just like, no.
listen,
I mean,
foolishness.
like the mouthpiece. There was no mouthpiece in there,
Well, that wouldn't even be in a first aid kit. That's the whole point, which
With-
speaks to, you would think in such a palatial estate there would be those sort of things because you have so many people on the grounds,
right?
And I assume, like, when you're calling your private physician, you're not calling 911, or it makes me think of Public Enemy 911's a joke. I would imagine that 911 wouldn't even be what you call or who you call, in those situations.
Right.
But I want to acknowledge what Chief Yuya put in the chat. Yeah. He says, tell me about it. People call him Chief, but try to play him like, a glorified butler and an ATM. It's so true. We'll get into it, but each person that was called was like, what do we get for Christmas? My Christmas list, the money. That was it. So it's almost like, what was he truly the chief of? And what sort of children did he father? That was, with that idea of family, they say, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he did take care of his, he's got his business in order, so the lawyers, Castle and Castle, Remy Castle and Teke Castle, informed the bloodline of legitimate and illegitimate of what happened. And as Akira Eden shared, everyone was concerned about them, like the daughters, the first daughters, Tenny
And to me.
and Tumi. Yeah, they were in the middle of scamming someone, and we're gonna touch on the Nigerian scam.
Listen, that fabric scam-a-lama, it was like the governess wore this fabric. Oh, this is the last piece of fabric. Come on.
But everyone,
My last one.
there's a lot of salespeople who do that with Ahmed, and they're not Nigerian, so
Right, salespeople do. Yeah, you're right.
It's just scams. It was just a whole I would agree.
And even Justina, when she was informed, he's like, where did he go without me? And then, I think they said, he's passed, and she was like, and we're gonna read the will. She's like, the will. Okay, I'm coming. But she wasn't coming before that. She's like, I'm not gonna go for that wahala. And
right
from the will, she was there, and then even who else did they inform? Oh yeah, the son. How they informed the son? Well, Donatis said your father dead.
He was so fed up with that. That man. He was so fed up with him.
But what's interesting about the notifications, though, is they called the first wife's daughters, the eldest daughters. The housekeeper, Miss Pat, called them and made the notification. The attorneys began to make phone calls to the other women. Nobody called the wife. Nobody called Lady K. Nobody notified Lady K, and nobody notified Femi. So, and what's also interesting is the mother's name was Kemi, Lady K, and the son's name was Femi. So it's something to think about. So the fact that, it made me question respect. You would think, or even how she treated people, right? That the woman who leads her house, technically the woman of her house, didn't even think to notify her or to alert her to what was going on. So she just walks into the melee in her dining room, literally.
Didn't even know.
Akio
Yeah.
first. Side chicks get notified like they're the wife.
What?
And-
What we
Yeah,
don't
well, some of them apparently, well, one of them apparently was a wife, right? Like,
right.
And this is the thing, yeah.
got
She pulled
receipts,
out
baby.
her receipts. She pulled out her receipts. Not everybody's a side chick, you know. You know what? The other thing I wanted to say was Justina CC ice cream. You know, when she first picked up the phone, what must have been said was he's gone, because she said, "Gone where? Hey, Seychelles." She started, you know, naming all these, you know, luxurious. I told him to take me with him. That was the first thing that she thought about. Oh, he went on a trip. He went on a trip without me. Every phone call that was made, what we'll get into, like, it was just very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, I think when you think about that particular scene as well, when we put it in context of what was happening. So it was early December, right? Pre-Christmas, but she's posting off in the front of, I think it was a Range Rover that was clearly just purchased, because she was posing with all her people, styling and profiling in her new Range Rover.
It was a
But, pardon?
It was a Benz.
Benz. Okay, a Benz truck. Okay. But then was preparing for her Christmas list and lamenting about having been left behind when Chief Daddy went on vacation. So there's this like succubus, like, we just want, you know, we just want and want and want, which speaks to what happens later.
Yes, she was stunting. She was with her friends.
It showed the different generations. Like, you know, it was basically like showing what social media age is doing, and she represented that, like, this generation, Generation X.
Yeah, I think both her and Femi.
Yes.
Yeah, both her and Femi showed like the stark difference between the elders and the new people. Say the new folks.
He was talking to the elders. He's like, "I'm gonna get my man done."
Yes.
Like,
Bro,
F-bomb.
you get me, bro.
You got me tight. You don't.
You get me.
You're mad. You're making me mad, bro. You're making him, and he would. Femi referred to himself in the third person. That was weird.
Like,
well, because he was a celebrity. He was a celebrity in his own mind, right? But what I thought was telling, like, just I keep like replaying the movie from the beginning, was when Madam Pat was bringing out the food and was, you know, confirming that Chief Daddy was good. And his phone rings, but it's not actually a ring. It's like a notification. And it's his son performing. It's Famzy performing. And he looks at it and he says, "Is this not my son?" Mm-hmm. Almost as if like to say, "I'm not down with this foolishness." And then he said, "Why is he speaking like that?" And so initially, like, I didn't catch it the first few times we had the pleasure of watching this movie. But I realized, you know, there was one part of me that thought, oh, yes, it's AK Famzy. Yeah, that's right. You can't forget the AK. Yes. But it makes me think about, you know, there was one part of me who perceived this as, this is the folly of sending your child abroad and thinking that, you know, having them go to Europe for schooling was a thing to do. And then I'm like, well, what made me assume that? It seems that he may have just taken on an entire persona.
This is true.
Entire persona, and decided, my pop got money. He's got billions. You get me, bruv? And so he just creates this whole, just like the AK Famzy. What does he know about an AK? I'm sure nothing.
Right. And his mother had to remind him. She's like, "Why are you even talking like this?" And she's like, "What?" And like, you, it kind of reminded me of like when I was younger. There's, you know, your parents like, "What does that mean? What are you talking?" And he's like, "It's because I'm from the streets." She's like, "You're not from the."
You're from the streets of this compound, like
right,
that.
Right.
You're from the streets behind the gate.
It's one of the things that I like about this film, the way it uses comedy to actually showcase or highlight some of the actual issues in that culture, right? Because you do see that. I think we were talking earlier, and there was some mention of some of this showing up in the Korean. You know, you pose and you try to keep up with the Joneses, and you try to mimic what you think is like a high standard of whether it's slang, conversation, articulation. You mimic that. And you think, or there's an assumption that if you speak a certain way, it represents or it shows that you come from money, right? Or you're wealthy, or you're traveled as well.
Educated,
So,
even,
and
right?
but I don't know how we could mistake that for with
Bro,
fancy. I don't
bro,
know.
bro. You get me, bro. Man on man.
Me, bro.
I might be wrong, but I thought AK was him actually missing the other A in AKA because he just didn't know.
That was so corny.
I was just like, oh, he don't know.
27.
Oh, that is funny. That is funny. That is funny.
Oh my goodness. But there's I also wanted to point out in that scene where they're sharing the notification of Chief Daddy's passing. I'm going to stick with this theme of minimizing masculine authority in this film, because you see it highlighted and underscored a lot in some of just the way they portray and depict men. And you see Femi, I was about to say Famsi. You see Femi.
Famsi too.
Actually, you see Auntie Ajoke beginning to speak to, I think it was Tinu and the other sister. She was speaking about, preparing for the funeral. And I think she was mentioning how much money would be required in order for the funeral. And Lady K overheard that and actually lost her marble. She started to, scream. I think she was saying, my husband is not even cold yet, and you all are already speaking about, his money, divvying up the money. And you also hear Femi step in and kind of identify, he's saying, I am, you're talking about my money. He's pretty much saying, you're talking about my money, I'm the legitimate heir to this estate. This is, those weren't his words exactly, But even in trying, I was going to say, even in trying to assert himself and, be that masculine authority, he says that, but then he shrinks into the background and walks away, almost as if he knows the women in that scene would lash out against him.
Yeah.
So I found that there's that consistent thread with him, and Femi constantly, in one moment he's trying to assert himself, but then he steps back.
And I wonder if that's because he doesn't even believe, right? Like he's got his own agenda and while he's saying, well, as the only heir, first it was the only heir, right? Because he's the only man child. That's all he knows, right? The fact that, but even, your father is a well-known industrialist, as it's, when it's said on the news and announcing his funeral, that's what he's described as. And so with that, why have you not come up under his businesses? Why were you not the CEOs, one of the VPs? Why are you the little clown who, is in the studio and can't even pay for your studio time? Like, it spoke to so much of, like, I would say maybe disappointment, right? With Chief Daddy watching his son perpetrate a fraud with a horrible British accent. You
Right.
get me? But still, this is the path that I'm taking. I'm blazing my own trail on Chief Daddy's dollar.
Well, it's kind of like, well, I can afford to do it because I have money. I don't have to think about what it means to maintain the family business because they're always going to take care of me. And then when they die, they're going to leave me money, right? As we see, like when he is when he's informed that his father's dead, he gets on the phone like, yeah, I'm gonna my dad gone. He left me a lot of money. That's all he was thinking about. There was not from anybody, like maybe Lady K, but I'm skeptical about that. Like there wasn't like any real mourning, you know. Maybe Miss Pat, you know, I think Miss Pat and Chauffeur Donatis, they maybe showed that could have also been like, you know, some of the just the how people show like frustration or just anger or sadness, like. But the most emotion seemed to come from the two of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, do you guys think that Famzi, aka Famzi, was innovating what his father did? Like his father must have been a trailblazer too, and it was his, you know, as this generation, maybe doing what his father was doing as an industrialist wasn't the road that he wanted to trailblaze.
He was bad at it.
I definitely think he thought he was a trailblazer, but when the more famous rapper tells him that he should take 3 years and 17 months to go focus on music and go think, I think that, you know, and also with the money piece, he wasn't paying for that studio time. If you recall, they were saying, yo, you racking up a whole lot of a bill here. And he was like, you know, I'm good for it. You know who my dad is. You know who like he was riding on his father's name, but maybe probably not even getting what he should be getting. He's probably getting a child's allowance because he conducts himself like a child.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was like, because he was probably on an allowance and he ran out, so he had to wait for the allowance, you know. Yeah. There was something I wanted to add about the accents, because it made me think about even how when people are moving here in the West, in the U.S., how people are treated when they have a certain accent. So that idea of like, if I speak this way, people are not going to think, you know, I don't know what I'm talking about, or I'm stupid, or I'm done, or I'm uncultured. So then there's this, you know, if I speak another way that, you know, drops guards and lets guards down, I can move the way that I want to move. You know, we definitely have that bias here.
That happens in the Caribbean too. I think in Jamaica they call it speaky spooky. You know?
Right.
Spooky, yes, speaking spooky.
It sounds horrible. But Chief made a good point that in his own lyrics, Famzy, you know, says, "Who's your dad?" Like he's basically, you know, that's the family. Chief says that's the lots of Famzy philosophy there. He stood up for that family name, like so many spoiled rich children do. Yeah. And that's what it says. Everything Famzy did was an imitation of what he saw others do. So.
A very bad imitation.
Yeah, and it made me think like that's the power that even like what's happened, like social media and music, you know, you start to embody, like Chief has said before, like what's the spirit that's going into music, and then, you know, what happens when we listen to it, you know, how that affects us. And so it kind of shows, like just like you said, like maybe he wasn't even sent for schooling in London, but like this is what he's exposed to, and so then it, like, you know, then it manifests, you know, within him.
Right. You know, it actually there's a weird thing that happens when you think what you finally get access to is better than what you had. I remember like when I was like 16, 17, I went to spend the summer in St. Thomas with my family out there. And, you know, I packed prepared for a Caribbean summer. I got there, and this was back in early 2000s. I got there, and they were rocking Timbs and heavy Canai jeans. And I'm like, y'all not hot? Like, y'all have to be burning up right now. Why are you wearing those heavy clothes? And they were wearing like the guys would have the heavy like Canai shirts that had the hoods on them, and it didn't make sense to me. And then I realized they had just gotten cable like a few years prior, and so they were getting BET now. And this is what we were wearing in the States. And so that's what they had to wear. And that's what they were sending for. Like my cousins that were down there, that's what they wanted me to then send for them. Send me some Tims now. Send me, send me hoodies. Where you going with a hoodie, son? It's like dumb hot. But I think there's a similar, like, Eliana. Oh. He's saying he's got it under control. Elion. Elion. So there's that idea of like, you think what you're seeing is better than what you have. So with pharmacy or Femi, it's like this idea of, I'm going to pretend because this is what wealth looks like. And this is how I'm going to represent my family line, even though it was an embarrassment.
She said it was a very bad imitation.
Them, bro.
Roses are red, violets are blue.
I'm moving mine.
So,
you gotta put the accent on it if you're gonna read it. Come on.
Right. They're moving mad. Before you chat to me, who's your dad? Yeah, Latino. Okay.
Very good. Very good. Yes.
Moving mad.
So I think. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was also going to point out that Chief also said typically in Nigeria you can. Did we read this already? No, you have access to the bag as a child of royalty or a rich parent. Almost the same thing nowadays. So your children and flossing are cultural displays of success, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it makes sense.
And that's prevalent in so many of the movies, right? It's like if you have even $10, you're balling. Your car has to be a certain way. They're all rocking Louboutins and, lots and lots of makeup and lots of wigs. And it's almost like their cultural imperative is only used as an accent. It's almost like the parsley. It's like a just garnish. The gele would come out as garnish. It's not really the core of what, they don't rep their culture as much as they do rep the dollars and the price tags.
Yeah.
I think the last thing with that scene was really just everyone coming together. That was it. So, which I thought was also kind of interesting because they all walked into that house as if they were family, if they had been there many times before, with the exception of the ones who clearly had been there before, which is the attorneys, Castle and Castle. They didn't even ring the bell. They beat the horn. And Lady K went out to them, which I thought spoke to everyone knowing their role to some degree.
Right. Because it speaks to even like, did we go over like the notification? Like the lawyer knew everybody to call.
Well, of course. They were all in the will because they were all family.
Right. They didn't know they was family until they all got to that.
They don't know. They knew that each individual knew that they were his family.
They knew, but it's like, I got my own thing going on over here. I ain't got to see you until I got to see you, so I'm good. And when you had to come together, that Ujima had to happen. It's like, what? What?
Right. Yeah. It's like when Lady K called them all illegitimates, and it was made clear, no. According to Chief Daddy, this is all family. Everybody gets a seat at this table, except for his seat, of course.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? One thing I noticed, it was interesting. Remy Castle, the wife, she kept trying to like comfort her, like, like kind of reassure her, like, this is how he wanted it, like, it's okay, like. And I wondered, like, if they had some sort of relationship, because there was something I noticed at the end. When we get to that part, I'll we can talk about it. But there was a constant like reassuring from Remy, right? Yeah, Remy, I think. From Remy, everything's gonna be okay. But she went forward, and read everything. and she knew as well. Like it seems that the husband Tega was the lawyer, but they work in tandem, so she was well aware of everything at the same time. And as he's like, calling everybody, she asked him like,
Who's
did
gonna
you
call your people?
right? Who's gonna call your people? And I wonder if that was like a low key of saying like, am I gonna be surprised?
That's high key.
I was
That's
like,
acknowledging like you got your people who's gonna be making these calls because she knew it wasn't gonna be her, right? That I don't even think that was a key at all. I think she was just kind of making it plain. And what I thought was just a side little, I don't know if anybody else caught this, but when he called, I want to get which woman this was. He called, was it Nike? And she was like,
who's gonna call you?
hey. It was kind of like she was expecting him to call, but not at that moment, almost like, oh, my boo's calling. And then when he announced what it was, her whole posture shifted. And I thought, that's interesting. She didn't seem surprised by the lawyer calling, nor did she seem excited, like, oh, Chief Daddy's, wants my Christmas list or got some money for me.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
that
He clearly like there was a relationship, and I'm not saying like something sinister, but there was his own relationship through Chief Daddy with each of the family members, each of the wives.
yeah.
I wondered the point you made about, I guess it's the bit of comforting that she gave to Lady K. I think she feels guilty because she knew all this time. She had to have known, and so there's, and maybe not, but I definitely think there was a little bit of you know feeling guilty having known some of this information all this time, but not you know being able to share it, and you know knowing it and developing a relationship with her over time,
Mm-hmm.
but not being able to say anything.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if also she's like comforting herself because
Yes,
you
that's what
say
I
to your mate, well, who's
right.
gonna make these calls? So all the while you're like, girl, it's gonna be okay. Like
Yeah,
it's gonna be okay.
I
Because
think
you're quietly thinking, all right, when it's my turn, it's gonna be okay. Like
yes,
who's gonna be
that's
sitting in my dining room? That's how I took it. But it could be, of course, more
There's
than more than one angle to it.
there's other things going on in Castle and Castle. See, that's why.
Oh,
They're,
so you got to give us the context.
yeah, they're not together because she was trying to take a leadership role. She's not. Tega likes to. Well, he was having another affair, so she divorced him. But he also likes to do pro bono work. That's why he had to leave, and she was upset that once again you're leaving our lucrative clients to go do pro bono work. But that's not her place either. So
just to go to the chat, right? Oh no, Chief said the culture is so interwoven and ingrained, it doesn't need outward expression like we do in the States. They already know their lineage and glory, so they show their conquering of Euro world too. Okay, that was to the point, like I think to the garnishing, um, like yeah. Right, Massimilian. Who's gonna call your side piece? Yeah. Okay, like high key. So it wasn't a low key. I was like, is that what you're saying? High key, right. That's what who's gonna call your side piece or pieces. You can't just have one. Pieces. Chief says, I can tell you those children would not have been hidden. That was the Western influence. They may be denied or neglected, but not hidden. That would just bring way too much shame and not tolerate it. Yeah, because I will say what Remy said at the table, like, what is she? They may be illegitimate parents, but no child is illegitimate.
Mhm.
And because that word was thrown around very easily. Legitimate. And I'm the only legitimate heir, and legit, like that word was like thrown around real easy and freely. And in front of the children, and it was just like
in front of the illegitimates,
in front of the illegitimate.
Illegitimate.
He
which
did
is
not.
so horrible.
He didn't deny any of them, and it seems like they weren't hidden. It was just like, this is your household, this is your, because they were not ignorant of one another. Nobody was ignorant of one another. They may have stayed separate, but they knew each other existed.
Not the eldest. The only one who knew about
Well, yeah,
was
he
Donatus.
he was afar. He was abroad, so he didn't know nobody.
Right.
Lady K.
No, with that, he didn't carry the. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say Lady K pretended the entire time that she didn't know.
She did, but Ajoke put her in her place.
Yes, she let her know you came from the same place,
oh,
honey.
No. Remember how you got here.
Yes.
Remember how you got here.
That's a cartoon question.
The secretary, right?
Oh boy.
The secretary here came up.
Mm-hmm. No, I thought it was the home health aide. She was helping the wife.
Okay.
But it got sick.
Mm-mm-mm.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Oh, let's finish that real quick. Naya feeling guilty. She's a lawyer, right? The one and only tomato juice, right? I think that's who you were talking to. Tomato juice. Naya said she knew everything because when Tega said he was leaving, she said, "You're gonna leave me with this crazy family."
Yeah, she knew.
Good point. She did say that. What you say, Maria? This is true. She did. Chief says, in modern culture, Lady K wouldn't have cared about her husband's concubine as long as she's not being disgraced. If she were, her family would have stepped in.
Right. This, so this makes me think of, I think one of the things I mentioned that I found was really clear in this film was the way it depicted the women as victims of plural families or polygamous, households, right? And I think after reading Chief's statement, there may be a hidden agenda of sorts, in this film to, just, I guess, poke holes in the idea that an extended family or plural family can exist and function properly and unified, right? So here they're showing you men who are not in the forefront, but the women are taking over everything. And they're pulling and pulling on Chief, but at the same time, they're showing you how, they didn't know. They're at least, I would say there's a part of it that kind of shows you the pretense, right? There's a pretentious ignorance of each of the other women to a certain degree. So it paints them as if they're innocent, right? Like they got into this relationship without knowing that this is what it would look like. And, I certainly think that is not true. So somebody, like I think we have to ask the question.
Yeah.
Who is someone setting us up with this film?
Well, I will say Auntie Ajoke makes it clear nobody's
innocent.
Is innocent. Nobody was in the dark. And she gonna run her mouth as she made it clear about everything because she knew it all. And I did see Anu Radio's question in the chat. So we would love we would love to hear if you all have any idea what cartoon character does Auntie Ajoke remind you of?
I didn't know you were
Once you get it, you'll never be able to take it out of your mind. Like you'll never.
Because I almost said it. I was like, Ajoke.
Right.
You know who also, let all the cards on the table was Cece. She let them know, finally, like the two and Nike and I'm Mickey.
Mm-hmm.
Peter and Paul's mama. She let them know, like, look at how y'all. It wasn't even it wasn't even like, oh, I'm in the dark. Every single wife or concubine or woman, whatever you want to call it, they were well aware of what his family situation was and how he moved. And so you're right. Like this whole like, and even Lady K, like I'm being disrespected in my house, like. And there was a little, the coming to the house and being rude, some of that was there because there was that sense of entitlement, like, well, I'm with Chief Daddy too. At the same time, this is her home, so show a little bit of respect. But like that whole like we don't necessarily, know about each other. No, you knew, and you knew because you came in real slick.
Right.
Each one of them, even Lady K, they all entered real slick.
They entered a little greasy. Had to
Mhm.
slide up in there. Literally.
That was
So, go ahead.
that was a good cinematography tool used though, like to show in conflict, like to explain the story of the backstory. Like I appreciated that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I wondered if the way they introduced, because when we talk about, like Chief talked about openness and there being movement outside of the comfort zone, that lens on plurality, even though there might have been, like you said, Akoti Maria, like, a setup, there was still that lens on plurality and movement outside of one's comfort zone. So if that's not necessarily what and or anything about, this film kind of highlights it, even though it does give a sinister twist, like, oh, this is what it is. It shows you that it actually is part of culture and moving with the grain of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so sorry. Guys, Jokey transitioned.
Say it again.
Chief said Auntie Jokey transitioned.
Yeah, I told you they showed that, like at the end. There is a second film. She did.
Around this time. Oh.
Yeah.
So prior to that, Chief says, New Nollywood always undermines traditional culture. Would there have been that much arguing? Absolutely. That's just the culture, but they always default to politeness when it's all said and done, when it's all done. So, this is, it's interesting because the same thing, came up as a theme when you, Koti Yafe and Koti Maria covered Raise the Red Lantern. There was this, negative connotation to what was happening. And even, the dungeon, and like it was like instead of it being something a bit more positive, there was a clear slant and a clear message being given about what plurality represented in that particular culture and how out of control he was as headship, and how easily manipulated he could be by his women. And none of that should be the case, is normally the case. So I think in this film there's a similar sort of lean, and I agree with Master Menelek's question in the chat. Would it be safe to say that the filmmakers were targeting a more Western audience? I would absolutely agree, absolutely. And because of that, they painted the picture of, so what's happening in the chat?
funny.
They're painting the picture of plurality being, something.
Such a horrible
Yeah.
experience. For
She did. What? She did, Auntie. She did.
No. I'm gonna stay out of it. I don't.
So we didn't even. Yeah. But anybody have an answer to the question?
My aunt is urgent.
My aunt is.
No, my aunt.
My aunt, yes, my aunt.
My aunt.
Oh, my.
Yeah, auntie dead. That's what it was.
Right. You know, so
What's
top tier
happening? Where's the
says
killer?
I
um
think they did kill
the
it. I think.
yeah,
Alright.
top tier speaker says that the film being on Netflix says a lot. And I you know, like I'll also say too, again, I think at the beginning we made the mention that you know, this film looks like an evolution of, you know, like what we're accustomed with when we speak about Nollywood. Or maybe I'm just looking at the new fresh face of Nollywood after all this time. So I've been, you know, in the dark. But it's clear that it's targeting um, Hollywood watchers, right? People who are, you know, willing to step outside of their Hollywood comfort zone and, you know, take a look at what cultural independent film looks like, but they have to mimic in a sense, right? They have to mimic, but not just mimic in terms of cinematography, but the plot and the storyline as well too.
That's too, but also the diaspora is, you know, very much Western as well. They want them to support. You know,
True.
so. And actually, a lot of the diaspora comes back to make Nollywood films because they can be very lucrative if they keep, you know, turning them out. They do.
Right. Well, the writer studied in Britain for a while, and you know he speaks quite highly of all of his accolades and so on. So
Mm-hmm. He's got all type of awards and things acknowledged by the BBC and like British folk in film. And that's like, you know, the top, like, you know, that's where the West is. Like, and we've all been guilty of it. I myself am guilty of it. Like, oh, well, you know, white man says it's good, so it must be good. It must be great.
But we also, what scene are we on right now?
yeah, that's a good thing. That's a good question.
I think we're still at the gathering at the house.
Yes, if we got there at all.
So are we moving on to the budget scene now? Yeah. Budgeting of the funeral.
Well, there was the reading of the codicil, right?
Right.
That was interesting.
And you know, this is where we get to see like that slant on plurality as the producer and you know all of you know folks who are involved in the filmmaking and the script writing and how that's supposed to go. We see that slant and as Akoti Maria pointed out, that pretentious, you know, kind of ignorance of each other and even like a disrespect. Like, and it wasn't even hidden. It was like it was contempt. That's what it was like. You know, there was a lot of like nose turning up in and, you know, a lot of that. And nobody wanted to kind of acknowledge one another. But as the codicil is being read, they get to find out like, no, this is how I want you to do, you know, my preparations for my funeral. Like Chief Daddy is posthumously talking to all of them. And this was clearly well thought out and prepared a while ago because like he was almost ready. So it even makes one think like, was something happening with him health wise that he knew about that maybe he did not share? And it goes to show like what are the burdens that a chief daddy, you know, someone like that alpha male, you know, has that we're not paying attention to, you know. So he could have definitely been ailing and dealing with something and everybody was just worried about their Christmas list, you know, like Uncle Tega's calling to take my Christmas list and things like that. Or, you know, Chief Daddy, you're gonna give me the condo. You know, that's all anybody was worried about. So he goes, you know, Remy goes on to read this codicil, and then they find out, like, yeah, you're not getting a dime unless you can pull this off. And not that you're not even getting a dime. We're not even going to read the will for 70 years. It's like, what's the point after that? Even Femi going to be old, you know? So it's like, we're not even going to read the will for 70 years if you can't do this. No rancor at my funeral. No, and we'll get to that. And so they go on to, you know, try to do that. And this is where he acknowledges each and every one of them. So we haven't really talked a lot about Dami. right? And so Dami, we find out, like, as everyone's coming to the house, like Dami opened up the film and we hear him narrating. So this is when we first see Dami coming to the house. He's actually meeting his father for the first time. And he comes only too late, hours late. He comes out like, a little while, maybe, because it was the same day, I think. So we'll go with hours, after his father has already transitioned. And then he's hearing the reading of the codicil, and all of this responsibility is thrust upon him. So now all these claims of legitimacy, because Famzy is like, you got me vexed and I'm legitimate. And it's like, no, there was someone before you, and he's not hidden. He's not being denied. And it's written. The lawyer has it. He is legitimate, and he's actually going to be given trusted with running the family business and the family over you. So that was not even, it didn't even click for Femi. It didn't even click, like, no. And the interesting part is, as everyone's coming in, who knew who everybody was? Shofa. Shofa do not see. He knew who everybody was. And if you watch closely, and this is how you see, like, what was the relationship between him and Chief Daddy. He's sitting and telling Madam Pat, like, this is so-and-so. This is so-and-so. This is CC Husband. Like, he's giving her the business on who everyone is.
Yeah.
I'm going to pause. Go ahead.
I thought you were going to the chat. Yeah. And it's the reactions. What was Chief mentioned how expressive everyone is. And I found that interesting, because there are moments during heated moments where that's part of the film. These are parts of the film that I really like, where they're mimicking how we too kind of like, just burst into all manner of conversation and twang and, accents when we're excited or very frustrated or angry, but you see the expression and the intent comes across, even though they are, speaking Yoruba or some other language at the moment, some other tribal language, and you're not sure what it is that they're saying, but you know what they intend, right? You know what the intent is. And, as each wife comes in, including, I can't remember her name. I'm going to look for her name, but including the mother of,
she's hot.
Fire. Oh gosh, say that other name. What's Saul and Paul?
Peter and Paul. Peter and Paul.
Peter and Paul's man.
Peter and Paul.
Mm-hmm.
You see all of the reactions.
Think that.
What's that?
That's Ekanem.
Paul. People might want to rethink naming the children Paul.
Paul. Oh boy.
That's our yesterday's study session.
Yeah.
So sorry, go ahead.
Oh, her name, Ekanem.
Ekanem.
I keep wanting to call her Eni.
Oh, her name.
Her real name. But yeah, you see all of the reactions that everyone is having. And you mentioned that Donatus knows everyone, but Auntie Ajoke, who is Chief Daddy's sister, is also aware of everyone.
Yes, true.
And their role and how they came in and what their function is. She probably knows names and addresses too. Yeah. Probably. And Menelik mentioned something that I wanted to, just point out too. Like, and I guess this helps us to transition a little bit into the preparation for the funeral. Actually, Chief Daddy assigns roles for the preparation of funeral meticulously. Like, it's clear that he knew everyone. He knew everything about everyone, their strengths, their weaknesses, and he spoke to it. Even, as he was, as each role was being read, So I just found that interesting, and everyone was able to execute, with the exception of uniting, which was the whole purpose, right? Right? That was the goal, But Mendelek says we got to see how Chief Daddy was aware of what each of his family members were good at and where they needed to improve while nobody could even name his favorite color. That was
Right.
Bingo. That we talked a lot about that favorite color thing. Like nobody. It also, and I thought about it, it also goes to show he also knew the character of each woman also. So he was who he was, throughout, but then he knew how much he had to give or not give with each one of them. And that may speak to why everyone, had a different idea of like what his color was because of what he was to them individually.
But that also brings conflict because, traditionally the asoebi is what is called family cloth, and that's what everyone wears.
Right.
You're one cloth to the funeral, and it's a tradition. Mm-hmm. So the fact that everyone was wearing a different cloth, mm-hmm. It's just so the disjointedness of the families.
Right. Right.
But also,
do we think that speaks to his lack of leadership? Because why was that not, if it's so indicative to the culture that it has its own name and it's a part of the funerary rites, why was it not stated? I'm like, it's just a question that I'm having. It's like, you know what? Well,
because remember in Tenny, where he said, "You take care of the asoebi." Nobody followed him. They all wear gold.
Yes.
Nobody wanted to listen to each other. There was that was the whole test. Like he did give each of them a task because he knew what they were capable of doing. Tenny and Toonie, say the name.
He knew.
He knew.
How are we introduced to them? They have fabric. It made sense that they would be, be in charge of that. They had the fabric. And they had, an easy portal, like, they had the plug. They was the plug for the fabric.
They were the fabric.
And nobody paid attention to it. Nobody cared. Everybody wanted to like do what they wanted to do and like be out front.
Right.
So they get something that's disjointed. The other thing, like, even pulling on what Master Menulek said, like knowing everybody's role, I think it goes in to show like this is why he, another reason why he chose Dami, because even with that, he knows who he had children with. And Dami and Femi are like very different. Femi is, in Nigeria, and he's like just kind of off the rails to the point everybody's just annoyed with him, in his stunting, that he's like from the streets. He's from these streets, AK Famzy, right? And then, but here we have Dami, who's raised in London. And he's not like that. He's more grounded. He comes in and he's got this heavy responsibility given to him. And he he really tries to take it on. And it just made me think like, Dami is apart from everyone else. Like, what trust must Chief Daddy have had in Dami's mother, that he would come up like that? He's apart and never met him, but it's like, you're doing what you need to do. And, and then here comes Dami, the head of the family and ready to like take charge. And I guess I would say he was humble. He could have been scared because that was a lot. Because he did say they crazy when his mom called. She was like, they crazy. They off their rocker. But he stayed, because he could have left. He's a big time footballer. He could have bounced.
Right. Yeah. I think even and I know we should get to the chat, even the idea of, like we're touching on particular themes, like there was a missed opportunity for transformation to happen at the reading of the codicil. Like that set the tone for a shift that could have happened, but it didn't. And so that kind of led to everything else that ensues. Especially recognizing that they had a very limited budget. It was almost like that should have galvanized them, the fact that that's all you got. But instead it brought out a more even scheming on, how the few dollars were going to be spent.
Mm-hmm. The different colors, though, I noticed Chief's comment. He says the elders would have shut down the different cloth things, though. funerals last for days on the continent, and the elders regulate heavily.
Okay.
Mhm.
But I thought that they added in that into the scene because at that time, well, right now, the Aso Ebi is becoming like more modernized. Like people are wearing it everywhere. Like there's a report that people are wearing Aso Ebi to baby showers and different parties. Like so, I think they were almost commenting on the changing of the tradition.
Okay.
I see like Naya's comment highlighted. Iriti was the only one. No, the only one who only one he said who didn't have a problem. And then I see she said because Iriti was about to be the problem, and that's very true. He actually didn't say that he called her fickle.
Fickle.
Not fickle. So
Yeah.
there, right then and there, is our clue to who Iriti really is, and we see that in the future. Not necessarily in this film, but we see like she wants something else. She got like she a double agent.
But in this film, what was interesting is that it was really the illegitimates that tried to pull the family together, right? It was she and Damileri who was going door to door when they found out y'all ain't getting. This was not the reading of the will. This is a reading of what could nullify the will or have the will read in 70 years.
Right.
And so with that, it was those two children who went and brought everyone together, which I thought was interesting, right? Well, not interesting. I think it set the tone for like, yes, we are all family. Let's conduct ourselves as such. And even though there was a lot, lots of melee after that, those two characters were chosen to be the peacemaker, if you will.
Anything you want to add? No? Okay. So we can move forward. I think we're at the point where we're talking about, okay, so one other thing in terms of like the funeral, the budget, we do see them negotiating. Like there's all of this negotiating happening.
Haggling.
What's that?
Haggling. They were haggling.
They were definitely
That's what that.
right. Which, from what I understand, is actually a good thing. It's actually a good thing. And I think it speaks to the point that you made earlier about them, like just making up packages. Now, all of a sudden, they have an Olympic package, and it's like, well, I'm so glad you brought up the historical context, because I literally said, listen, you all are scamming the people. You just made up this thing on the spot.
Make it up. And they couldn't even say what was in the Olympic package. So she says, yes, we got Olympic. And he's like, oh, yes, Olympic. And Olympic is because, And then at one point they said they had to bring pallbearers in from Madagascar because he's heavy. And then they're like, how much does he weigh? And they're like, no, like he's a heavyweight. Like he's got status. They were going to bring their cousins. Okay. And charge a fee and say they flew them in from Madagascar. That was the point. It was a whole money grab scam.
I mean, I guess we can move a little bit further into the film. This is connected to the budget as well, because you see them even negotiating during the funeral party. Yes. You see them, the caterers are asking and demanding for their money immediately, and they're kind of, let's not even talk about the tools and the walkie-talkie and all the other things. As you're rolling on the floor, it's absolutely
over. Just making up stuff.
Right, making up stuff. But I think the walkie-talkies are it's symbolic too. It's a representation of I guess how deep the hole is that they dug for themselves, because here you are with a real issue, and even though many of you have been taking and taking and taking from Chief Daddy, no one was able at any point to say, you know what, we don't have the funds, but I do. No one said that. No one said, oh, you know what? I have been actually saving and I could put this up front to cover XYZ costs until we get nothing.
Mhm.
Nope, no one was able to do that. So I actually find, like some of that interesting in the film.
It was payday. It was payday for everyone. You know,
What you
everyone
said?
it was payday for everyone
It
except
was.
the people who weren't in on the coast of the
Yeah.
yeah.
I just want to make sure we don't skip Chief's comments. He said Dami was good. Dami, that's because Dami was Ghanaian and went to school in Pennsylvania. Plus, even though he was simping with all thrusters on full, he was smooth. He was. There was some fact. He was simping. He
She said,
did.
I can't.
But it's to your point that they made it for a Western audience. They got to put the love story in there, and make it quick. They had to fall in love quick.
And as Chief said, he was eye candy for the sisters. That was his purpose.
Oh, okay.
Right, because what was the purpose of playing football in the front with no shirt on? Like right in the whole front. You're so stressed. You're so stressed. You just don't.
Oh, who's the new one? I don't know.
Make no sense. It made no sense.
But he also says, I think I missed it. He said he didn't have any game. He was being Molly. What does that mean?
Molly Wop, like bust upside the head.
I don't know.
But
Molly Wop is like, yeah, you just getting. So I just picture like a sock. Just no, that is a Millie Rock. You know what? That is Millie Rock, not Molly Rock, and it's not even how you do it.
Well, I don't know.
No, but neither does Kotiyape. That's the point. Molly Wop is like you getting bust upside the head. That's what Molly Wop.
Backhanded?
That's not it.
Can we can get into the definition behind
All right.
the scenes.
Somebody put Molly Wop in the chat.
Chief says Molly Wop means to be them, okay? El Cora
Yeah.
wants to know
Oh.
Yeah.
I was doing something with my hand. It just, wasn't paying. So yeah. Okay. So we're on to the funeral preparations and why are you laughing?
I'm just laughing at Aki. He said, "What is you doing?"
Molly Wopping. Oh, sorry, Millie Rock. Whatever.
Oh,
You were doing neither, actually.
Whatever.
Neither and neither, all at the same time.
I was doing my thing.
oh my goodness.
So I have to do it twice.
Thrice.
Mm-hmm.
I could only shake my head. Can't do anything else. So we're at the scene actually where we're at the funeral party scene, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're all on the same page. Yeah, we're at the funeral party. And I think you mentioned we were having this whole conversation about the different colors and there's something that I felt was really significant. It was a moment where Lady K could have experienced some form of transformation, right? She could have elevated. She had an opportunity to be what would bind the family together in some sort of unity. And I say that because during that whole dance scene, right? And I had to look up what the funeral party was called. Like sometimes we call it a wake, some people call it a wake, depending on what type of party. But this one is called an Wombmyn, which is just, a party and a gathering that happens for different celebrations. And in this case, celebrating the life of Chief Daddy. Mm-hmm. And so you have music and you see all of the women being called forward and everyone's dancing. And they're just, they're enjoying it. Everybody's looking around like, this is not really the place for it. But each wife or each concubine actually enjoys that moment with their maidens and friends, and I think the MC makes a mistake. He makes a he makes a horrible mistake that almost cost him his life actually. And Lady K, that just triggers Lady K. She was okay with everyone dancing and everyone being called, all the wives of Chief Daddy. She couldn't take that. But I believe that the last wife that was called, they miss. I think he misnamed her, or mistitled her the first wife, or Lady K. What he said, the first wife, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the way, Lady K is not even the first wife.
No.
This is the
Booyah!
thing.
That's what I was like, but you're not
That's
the
the
No.
truth.
one. You number 3, because Dami's child is older than hers. Boom.
There you go.
Number
That's
3.
the truth. That's the truth. Bronze medal for you. So
You get a bronze. That was good.
Right. Okay. That's horrible. Everybody else gets participation trophies. Oh,
but I found that, and I was actually pulling from that formula that Chief gave us for breaking down the films. And I was looking at a point where I expected her to grow. Like I expected her to go through that transformation and actually take the hit, walk up to the stage, make a dance, and actually just say who she was.
Right.
And that would have been more than enough to gain the respect of the other woman. But she did not. She shut it all down, made a mess of everything. And it makes me think about how well Chief Daddy knew her, right? Because I find it interesting that in the end, maybe I'm giving it all away, but in the end, he kind of knew that they would not be able to accomplish the task that he gave them, and could not put his trust in even Lady K to be able to do that. And I had to identify a few required qualities from the Anue, because it's like there's a lack of emotional maturity there, huge lack of emotional maturity. There was no control of emotions, just absolute. She lost it. She lost it. And there was also a lack of understanding what the community needed at that time. She was not able to see that all the women needed was just a moment to bond, right? That was a bonding moment for them. And she pulled herself away from that. So I don't know what you all thought about that scene, or that, that part in the funeral party.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of agree with what Master Menelik said. He says, I also thought it was a good chance for Dami to tell everyone to get their ish together. So it would have been nice to see Dami take take the helm and him take the mic, because there's too much people.
Well, what's interesting, what even opened up the entire dance scene was Femi's greed. He wanted to perform, and so the payment for his performance was that he introduces not his mother, but rather the sister who controlled that part of the planning. And she says, well, sure, you can perform if you do something for me. And so that set the timing for who was introduced and when. And so, so in a way, he knowingly, because we may not all know the customs and the traditions, but he knows the order that the wives should have been acknowledged, or the women should have been acknowledged in. But he was fine with betraying his mother by calling up and acknowledging, I forget which one it was.
Ekanem.
Right. So it's like he didn't mind calling her up first, which says a lot, because that was her son, and the one legitimate heir, So yeah.
And then he tries to clean it up after everything is already done, when he's like, no, you need to call my mom. You need to call my mom. You should have did that, because he could have, after she agreed, because he went first. He could have just called his mama, but he didn't even think of that. Like, you went first, just call your mom up. Maybe there's no honor among thieves, but You know the order. If you're the heir, like, yeah, sure, okay. And then you do what's right.
Mm-hmm.
Nick Cage came up in the green, you know? Nick Cage was like, okay, well, I'm not going to waste any time. I'm wife number 2. You know?
Right. Well, once the procession began, it's kind of like, I won't sing the song, but it's kind of like just walk into the light, like come up and dance, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? It was like when she got up, you could even see from the way she got up. No, she's not going up to dance. And they slowed it down. It's like, dang, she's not going up to dance. She gonna ruin it. And everybody saw it. Once they realized she was walking up, they tried to like stop her and pull her back. So then it makes you think like actually it was her who caused the rancor at the funeral party. Because if she had just got up and joined in the dancing and like, you know, like you said, like taking that opportunity for transformation or that mirror of self, you know, showing how she could rise to the occasion, then that whole fiasco on the stage would have never taken place. Instead, she needed to get up and say, like, my husband's funeral is taken over by concubines. And that was her whole need to show, like, what her place was. And like you said, Maria, if she really wanted to let everyone know what her ranking was, there was a classier way. I'm sure she could have found a classier way to do it. And did she even need to, right? Because I'm sure everyone there knew that she was his wife.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, she walked into that, and that was a, you know, Auntie Ajoke kind of checks her a little bit earlier. A couple scenes back, she kind of says, you know, go do what you do all the time. Like keep your head in the clouds. You know, stay in the clouds. You know, kind of up there, unaware of what's happening down here. Kind of always set apart, or separate. Well, not set apart, but just separated, or separating herself. Sorry.
That connects to what Imanai and top tier speakers were speaking about. That even Chief Daddy knew that she was kind of in the clouds, but she was in the church clouds. You know, the church was her man, based on what Chief Daddy said.
But even in what preceded her going up and starting the whole speech, there it was kind of like that all eyes on me moment. Her people were watching her to see, oh, how's she gonna handle this? What's she gonna do now? And I agree with what you're saying, Akoti Maria. It would have been a perfect opportunity to even reflect the other side, right? Because a lot of what was being shown here, I would say, was the shadow side. So it's like, when could she, or when would they actually reflect the light of the patriarch, right? When were they going to show just a little respect for what he definitely poured into them and expected them to deliver in the end? But they all each had their own interest above, his. So to me, it really did speak to, there are so many required qualities that are not being personified here. But ultimately in that moment, it was like being sisterly. Like we all lost our head. That part, I don't think anybody ever acknowledged that part. Like everyone was like, well, I'm grieving more. Like I had a bigger loss. I lost more than you did. Which is really foolish. And even the how competitive it was, like it was petty. Because if you all along, as Chief acknowledged, they would have all known about each other. So it's like, if you've been playing your position all this time and you doing your thing, why not continue to do that? If that is the charge, right? And if one is supposed to pick the color, get on board with the color. So yeah, there was a lot of missed opportunities. So I see there's a whole lot happening.
You know what? And some of that strife and contention, it wasn't necessarily between Ekanem and Nike.
No, they were cool.
It was more Lady K and everybody else. And like you can feel, even when they walked into the house, it was this proof that I matter and I'm legitimate. I have, offspring as proof. And I'm putting it in your face, like, because everybody kind of knew. Even CC Ice Cream, Justina, she didn't want to deal with Lady K's Wahala. So it was actually everybody else against Lady K, Lady K against everyone else. They already knew what energy she was coming with, and so everybody already came on the defense because they were ready for her Wahala.
Right.
Yeah. And it was an opportunity for her to be dignified. It was an opportunity for her to embrace the truth of her husband's lifestyle and his choices. And I think that only highlights what you were saying too, Ima Yakira Eden. And she chose not to. She chose not to. And I actually think it's scary that he probably knew she would reject that opportunity, right? Because the way things play out, it's almost as if he knew everyone would do what they do.
Right. Right.
Everyone would do what they do.
I like what Master Menelik said in the chat. He said she wasn't being the wife. She just kept pulling that card when she wanted everyone to defend her. It's so true. And I would agree, top tier speaker. Yeah, the women cared more about status than they did having class. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because you know what? We may have been ignorant to the expectation of wearing the family cloth and the particular color, but they would not have been. And so from that, it shows y'all have no unity, y'all are class. Like there's no class. Because how can you not come together to show respect for your head? Like I'm kind of stuck there. Like how do you not just say this is what we are expected to do, to show reverence? And we just gonna all come up like the Rainbow Coalition, rocking, rocking, rocking all sorts of colors.
United Colors of Benetton.
Oh my, my, my. Okay, yes.
And there's a lot of instances where we see high levels of possessiveness, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think that goes back to the idea of being competitive and I, me, this is my status. I'm number one, two, three, four. I've got the bronze. But I'm gonna pretend like I have just really very petty,
Yeah.
and not dignified at all.
And I think that's playing to, I should say, the Western perception of plurality, right? Well, yeah, if they're all coming together, it's got to be like this. Like they all have to be jockeying for a position that only one will have. And it's like, okay, but then there are all these other positions. And like there was no credence given to that besides in the reading, in Chief Daddy's, in the doc. Now I'm losing blanking. What's the name of the document? The codicil, right. Only in the reading does he delineate this is what you represent, this is what your role is, this is how I value you. But none of that was ever respected fully, throughout. So it's like he set the tone, but it wasn't honored, which, as we know, he knew it wouldn't be. So
But they were all happy about their roles as well.
They were.
they were excited. They were excited, as they should be.
Well, I think they were excited until
No money.
no. Lady K was like, she ended it with the like, oh, this all in my house. She didn't want to be, if she had not, ended that reading like that, because from a joke on down, everybody smiled and, because they kind of felt him coming through the reading of it. And they even do it, like, even though it's Remy reading it, they use Chief Daddy's voice. And so, like, you see them, like, yeah, he did call me tomato juice. And, I'm the spicy hot pepper. And CC Ice Cream, she likes that sort of thing. Like, they reveled in him acknowledging, like, who they were and revealing that he understood and liked who they were. It was Lady K that kind of, like, how you have, like, a dream bubble? She literally came up and, like, I'm taking all this down. Cut that out.
Yeah, I'm inclined to think that it was also, the excitement around, yes, I get to do this with an infinite budget. And so when that piece of, I think that also helped to burst the bubble as well, because it was then when they were like, how much we got to work with? What? And similar to what Master Menek was saying, they were excited until they started grave robbing. Right. Because the other piece is like now these vendors, I mean, I have to mention VVIP,
VVIP.
okay? Because VVIP is going to give you exemplary service. And he had his rundown with his little bow tie for how he was just going to get all of this money before they decided to go with a very different caterer,
Mm-hmm.
Miss Tasty, who was selling peanuts on the side of the road, who
But
Well,
that's
became the funeral caterer.
I don't
that's
think they knew that she was Miss Tasty from the side of the road.
Oh
The
yes, they knew that when the funeral home called her, that's literally they called her cell, and they knew because remember,
family.
Tinu, no, the family didn't know, but at that point they were trying to save money, so that's when Tenny and Tinu said, "Listen, this
You'll
is the
still
price you give in for the funeral. Do you know a caterer?" And Mr. Walkie Talkie and Mrs. Walkie Talkie went and called
The peanut woman.
a
Miss
peanut.
Tasty and she peanut pan. So
But that's also satire, like them making fun of Western culture because we have all these packages of VIP and I went to all exclusive, and really, if you really take a look at all this all exclusive stuff, it's not that special. So
nope.
they're poking fun at Western culture a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Even the VVIP services, because it was so like, even the way he presented, well, at VVIP, like, that whole Hasidity, like high class, like, this is what I offer. Right, with his tight, it wasn't tight shirt and tight jeans and his skinny tie. At VVIP services, it's just like, what? Dude.
Yeah.
And the scam, because he kept delaying the cost. He kept delaying the total
Yeah.
cost. I'm like, see, trying to pull a fast one over there.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they went into the kitchen and left him standing, he says, "Oh, and the price is negotiable, ladies." It was like, "Oh, now you want to negotiate?"
And he wanted to lock in the date first.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's talk
Let-
about
Mhm.
We have decided to go in another direction.
All right. So
Are we caught up in the chat?
after that, yeah, I think
We
so.
can't see the chat, so
Okay.
Oh yeah.
So impatient Ajoke. So Naya says even impatient Ajoke was funny timing in the reading. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing her. Master Menelik says Kay undermined Chief's authority instead of enforcing it as the legitimate wife.
Yeah.
But throwing that word legitimate around and da 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 da. And had she been kinder, then maybe they would have listened when she said the Aso Ebi will be gold.
Right. Right. Right.
any other comments?
Master Menelik said he was
Kick him in the chest. Because
Yes.
here at VVIP,
Yes, he was so
VVIP,
annoying. I was like,
with his bow tie, it's like VVIP. You know what? But it spoke to my grandmother used to say your comeuppance. It's like everybody's trying to come up. And they perceive this family, right? Like this is our opportunity to make a come up. And that was even played against them when they were negotiating with the funeral home. It was like, well, listen, we don't have this, but we have this amount, right? And they cut that price in half, and it was so low that they said, well, Miss Pat, when you die, we got to bury you. And Miss Pat is like, no, you're gonna die before me, right? So there's this idea of we just want in. We want to say we did this. We want to say we're connected to this compound, this name, just to kind of boost ourselves. So there was, again, it just takes me back to that idea of like usury, and how unfortunate it all became, like the swirl of,
Mhm.
yeah, they were, benefactors, but it's like everybody was using everybody to some
Mhm.
manipulating, which I know is something that was discussed behind the scenes. Yeah.
Yeah, about the finances
Mhm.
and how they operated, and yeah, like just it's like it's just there's no respect for I don't want to say like your community, but they're all yeah, like it goes to show like why like having doing business within your community and with your allies is important, because if
Right,
you don't, it leaves you open to the scheming and the scamming and everybody trying to get over and everybody trying to get their come up on your back.
right, right.
Top tier speakers. Right. Like, so regards to Lady K, she openeth her mouth with wisdom and her tongue is the law of kindness, Proverbs 31. So Lady K had multiple opportunities to have her transformation into the Proverbs 31 woman, and she left it. She stayed in the shadows.
She
And
left
The
it
one,
at
the
church.
one
She left it at
married to
she
the
left it at
the
Well, you
one
know
was
what?
married to the church.
Interesting
right.
enough, though, when the priest, I don't know, priest, pastor, whatever, he had a collar. When the man of the collar walked in and he said shalom, shalom, nobody wanted to hear any greetings from God. So there wasn't, not to say that he's God, but he comes in with the greetings from the church. I know that sounded off. He comes in with the greetings and he's talking about the Most High, and everybody's like and they literally all turn around and walk off. You
They're
know,
not interested.
with
Yeah.
inspiration. There was no connection to the Most High. They did not want to hear it, and it's because the only thing they were thinking about was the almighty dollar. Well, the naira, in this case.
Right.
So toward the end, I think we're getting toward the end where there's a
Mhm.
reading of the will, right? And jump in as you see fit. But all I remember is the youth get 50,000 naira,
50 million.
50 million naira,
Yeah. Mhm.
but they also receive property as well too. And just I thought about how many children he had, and how, what the first thing I wanted to know, which I found was not developed very well in the film, because you don't get to, well, not until later on in the second part
Mhm.
two of the film do you see what industry it actually is,
Yeah.
but I wondered at that point, what was he invested in? What was his business?
Soil.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I don't know that we found out what his business was, but we did get a sense of the inner workings of, his transition over to the IPO and what was happening. But I think that the distribution of the funds kind of spoke to just like it just showed again their greed. But I think, and also it spoke to his wealth, right? So it like painted that picture. Um, but even beyond like how much each individual was to receive, um, I think it also spoke to like him moving past the classism, because he took care of the chauffeur. He took care of Miss Pat and even Miss Pat's daughter. Um, even in and I know we spoke about this, earlier, well, behind the scenes earlier, but even with CC Ice Cream, like she was the first child in his orphanage. So there's this idea, maybe there's this assumption that, oh, she was the only one that was adopted, but surely that's not the case. So we don't even know how many children, when he's referring to children, he's actually even referring or speaking to, or what provisions were made um, that addresses ensuring those youth are also covered. So he was, and we know that the chief or the head, stoops the lowest and it serves.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like he served. He served in life, he served even in death. I mean, he was serving them from the beginning. They expected him to resolve their conflict over the chauffeur. So it's like clearly he served at every level. But how they served him never really manifested appropriately,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you only hear only after they think that they're not going to get their payout, their payday,
Right.
because of the fiasco at the funeral party. You see them begin to finally be honest with one another. You
Mm-hmm.
know, where we learn CC Ice Cream is actually not one of his
Right.
women, one of the concubines or whatever title you want to give them. She's act like you said, she's the first one that he adopted, the first child in his orphanage. So she's his adopted daughter. She's technically Femi, um,
The
Dami,
sibling, that's right.
Paul, Iriti. She's their sister, you know. And she says, like, you know, and she's telling this to Ekanem, and she's like, but you know, when people thought it was something else, I just didn't fight it because I knew I would get more respect that way, you know. So then it goes to show like how are adopted children looked at, and we know like how many of y'all played that joke on your younger siblings, or you was adopted. You know, there's this negative connotation sometimes, even as children. Look at me, you was adopted. You know,
Yeah. I
that
would
was
think even more so on the continent because it's so much about your family and your bloodline and who your people are and who's your mother, who's your father. So it's like to be in an orphanage is I would imagine it's like less than being, the help. It's the lowest of the low. And so she would rather be perceived as one of his concubines or, that little young girl because she was what, 26. Um, as opposed to being what is truly beautiful, being the first child in the orphanage that he adopted. So I think it really spoke to the some. I never pulled that you were adopted, but I think that would be hard to do because we look like our people. But I think that different to us doing that, this was like more the cultural the implications of what it means to be adopted or to be in an orphanage, actually not even adopted but just unwanted. um in
And
that
the point you made about being adopted or being in foster care. So
orphanage. Mhm.
I have to say, to so to speak, because it's, yeah, we it can compare to what we have over here, and
Yeah.
yeah, they're considered at the bottom of the social class, and they would be maybe not employed, but given an opportunity to have food and shelter
Right.
if they exchange it for time and energy, so you will be a maid servant pretty much
Right.
in an affluent home, um, and exchange your time and energy for food and shelter and maybe even education. But there was another point, Lady Pat's daughter, right? I think this also, goes with what?
Dora.
Adora. Yes, yes, yes. um, Lady Pastor, this goes to your point, Ima Yakira Eden, that you know, typically she would not have been in that room with the reading of the will. She did not belong there. She even though she was Lady Pat's daughter, typically culturally that was not the place for her. So, I think it speaks to how open and embracing Chief Daddy was, of his servants, and he saw them more as people. He saw them as people, and yes, there. I think part of them bringing the quarrel to him in the beginning too is to almost show that there was a side of compassion and understanding that he probably shared with them, and a different level of interaction that went beyond servant and just serving him in that way.
Mhm.
They had a relationship.
Right. Right. Yeah, there was a rapport that went beyond. Yeah, absolutely. Well, this was beautiful. Yeah.
It was. Is there anything else in the chat? Any additional points?
No, I think they're quiet. Well, Well, Master Manelek says, let's see, they wanted to sell a group package because old boy was complaining about nobody dying and business being slow. Right? Yes, he should. He sure did.
And nobody's dying. You told me.
Yes, yes.
He was
Yeah.
mad that the doctors didn't send him the people from the pandemic. You know, he's
Yes,
like, what?
that's what it was.
He's like, where?
There was a
He's
pandemic.
like, where are the plagues? I need something. My gosh. But yeah, that's about it in the chat.
Interestingly, that they there was a pandemic, and then this is the year before, the pandemic.
How about that? Yeah, 2019.
I think it was the same time.
No, this is 2018. The pandemic. But
See,
we didn't find out
well,
about
it was moving. It was moving through quiet. It was moving
Yeah.
through. It was moving through
Oh, maybe, yeah.
quiet, like it was. But this was fantastic. So what a fun, light film, but we were still able to, put it in context and really pull some of the themes. And I would be remiss if I didn't touch on the I can't even say the undertones of feminism in this, but the fact that every man in this film was cut off. I'm not even going to talk about the hit, but just verbally disrespected by every woman in this film. Like they each did it consistently. Yeah, it's something that we want to be cognizant of as we look at these films. I know Chief, you touched on it in a recent podcast, and it's like for those who know, you recognize how this shift is happening, and it's very intentional. It's not even covert anymore. So as we go into the next film, continue to look for it.
Yeah. It
Call
was
it
like to what Akoti Maria said, Femi, he shrinks back. I'm the only legit, he shrinks back. That's also what happens at the funeral party. Dami tries, but then he's like, all right, it was all the women on the stage. So he literally was like, I'm out.
right.
He throws his hands up and he just turns around and leaves.
Something that for me was the reciprocity part, and I just wanted to highlight that we all remember, the work that Chief Yuya has done for us to even be doing this broadcast, and that we all have our level ups, and to remember the reciprocity to get back to what has been built. So that's what stood out for me during this film.
Yeah. Oh, we didn't talk about Miss Ride or Die.
How did we not speak about her?
We forgot about Miss Ride or Die. The one who played her position.
Yeah, so that's Sandra, Famzi's girlfriend. What did you say?
Famzi's wifey.
His wifey.
Wifey, right. So when and just thinking about like, wow, none of these women like they all were just so out of pocket in one way or another. I thought about the least mentioned, and we didn't even mention her until the end. Thank you, Makoti Amina. The least mentioned or acknowledged character, and that's Sandra, Famzi's wifey. Yes, she was twerking. Yes, her outfits were grossly inappropriate, but she wound up being like the only woman who just showed support for what was happening with her mate. She was actually quiet in this film, and kind of just played her position, even in what she did do, right? Making the music video, she was serving. She was serving as Famzi or Femi required. So thank you for bringing that up, Akoti Yamina. Yeah. She was cheerleader number one. Mm-hmm. She did, and oh, that's okay. That's sovereignties, exactly. Man, I'm getting her. Yeah, he did say that.
That's how you remember that.
Man, I'm getting it right.
That's what it was. It was like a third person, but he was like
Yeah,
a
man.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, she was a hot girl, but you know what? she was the only one who I could say, all right, at least she played her position. Like she knew what her role was. She wasn't letting none of them bad talk her little horrible rapping boyfriend. She even took his lies when he's like, yeah, he said I'm the best thing since Drake. Like I'm gonna blow up bigger than Drake. She knew he was whack.
Mm-hmm.
And she just was like, yes, you're gonna do it. So yeah. But you know what? She was more than a groupie because that was his maybe she was the patient groupie, but he didn't have no other groupies, I'll tell you that much.
Yes, right. She could have been the patient one and been like, well, I was there from the beginning, but he's also the heir to an industrial tycoon. So there's also that piece as well.
But I felt that there was I mean, it's a film, so everybody's acting. But I felt that I felt that there was that genuine reciprocity. There was respect that she shared and showed to him, and I think he cared for her.
Yeah.
You can see that,
We see that in 2 more, I think.
that in 2 more. Yes, of
She
course.
did. And she speaks more.
And yeah. Beverly Osu.
Yeah.
Yes.
She was bratty though, but much closer to what a man would want.
Yeah, they showed more of that in the second one, but in this one, she was the only one who like seemed like she had some semblance of supportiveness.
This is true.
She reminded him that I didn't even catch that part. She reminded him that he promised her a car when he got signed.
Yeah. Well, he needed motivation to Don't forget.
Well, that would have been incorrect, right? Now she doesn't need to motivate him. That's not her fault. But yeah. But other than that, I mean, she didn't hit nobody. She didn't curse anybody out. She didn't argue with anyone, right?
Just in her thing, she might have to wait 3 years and 17 months for the car, but she probably would have done it.
I think that was so funny. Like, why did he not say it?
That was funny. Caught that on the 3rd time around. It's like, he said that 3 years. Why didn't he just say 4? What was it? How do we count it? 4 years and 6 months? Right.
4 years, 5 months.
4 years and 5 months. Like, how can you say 4 years and 5 months?
Just so he could sit down and think about it. Like, you need to sit first and calculate this formula and then go from there.
Could one of you see yourselves as a concubine to Chief Daddy at any age? That's a trick question.
Yeah.
Is that a trick question? I mean, I would say based on the circumstances, sure. I think if I'm placing myself in that environment, in that realm, yes. And I would imagine that it would be the ultimate opportunity, no matter what my status was. So yeah, that would be my answer.
Let's see. I think
I'm say no because he had gazillions, and then you're in Nigeria.
I would say yes, but then it's like the reality we have to be realistic because all of those women had children, so it's clear that he was with them when they were younger. So we don't see any older women. They're older now. So it's like, does he even take older women into his harem, right?
Oh,
so,
the age part. Okay, the caveat.
Says
age.
Yeah. So I'd be like, yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'll be accepted, right? So I want to just acknowledge the age.
Yeah. My thought was yes, but at 25. Right? That was my thought. Yes, because the question does have at any age, not any age, at an age where you are most fertile,
right.
And you can add to
yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have any of them?
No.
I'm like, you gonna answer the question?
Yes.
Yeah, I think because the concubine, I mean, the little that I understand, a concubine isn't necessary. Like those offspring aren't even like counted in the like what's being done even in this film isn't necessarily consistent with what happens in the tradition of plurality. Because if I'm not mistaken, Chief has touched on the offspring of the concubine like not being tethered to the inheritance. And so if the expectation is concubine, for me, I guess I said yes and didn't really pay attention to the at any age part because what will my role be? He knows my age. So if that's an opportunity, then my role isn't necessarily to produce offspring, but my role could be something very different. So that's how I'm perceiving it.
But understanding too, right? Yeah.
What? Oh,
Also, exactly. Chief's point. That
Hmm.
there's value in that man. When we talk
Right.
about the high valued,
Yeah.
right? There's so whatever you produce, whether child or whatever you produce, it is
Yeah.
better, significantly better on a higher quality.
Hmm.
Uh-uh.
Hmm.
Who trying to look for old broads when you got millions? The question was, would you be willing? Not if he would be willing to take you.
there is some tap dancing. So yes, the question to the answer is yes. I said yes.
Right.
Acknowledge the age. Yes,
Yeah.
a little soft shoe.
Gosh.
Right, because really, can we see ourselves, right? So it's a whether you could see yourself doing being there. Yeah. Tap dancing. Who's tap dancing? Oh,
What do they call that? Pot of Murray?
A what?
soft shoe, a little soft shoe, the front of the pulpit. Sorry, soft shoe
Church
tap.
shoes. Church shoes.
Yeah.
Oh, how
Oh,
broke
yeah.
Bro.
you.
Rico. Mm-mm-mm.
Bobby.
Oh well. Well, this was good. What do we have next? What's up next?
What's next?
No, not much. That's not what's next.
Oh,
I'm like, you said that earlier, and I'm prompting you because that's not what's
no,
next.
that's not what's next. I would have been sitting there like. So, join us next strong as we get into our second film, and we'll be breaking down. This one's for Brother Low. Kama Sutra.
Rico, Ale, Ale, Ale. Still remember that song, Suave. Ale. Why do
Do
see
you have on like biker shorts in that Rico?
Rico?
Wow.
That has to be in the next mix somehow, Yamina. I don't know how.
Ooh, we showing our age. Rico.
Suave.
I don't know what song you're talking about, but I got you.
Oh, you don't know? Yeah, you might be too young. That's funny. That's funny.
Yeah.
Or maybe it didn't make its way across, across
Yeah.
the toll bridge.
So yes. So next strong, join us. Join the house as we will break down Kama Sutra, A Tale of Love. You can find it online. There's ways to find it. So I encourage you to watch it and dissect it so we can, get into, what inspiration, openness, opportunities for transformation, light and dark, and all those things in between as we break down the film and decode it. So willingly, this breakdown was a lot of fun for you all as we got into a lot of things. Yeah, we gave the synopsis, but some other things that definitely should be touched on. Happening in the world at the time, history. there was a piece that we didn't even get to, like the names, right? Like the names of Beecroft. Is that a Nigerian name, or Castle and Castle? Like there was so much that we, didn't even get a chance to get into. But you can definitely share some of those thoughts in the comments, right? And raise the, and help the algorithm with the video and share it. Like, share, and subscribe. And talk about like some of the things that maybe you noticed in the film, that we didn't break down. And of course, we see all the comments and we'll definitely respond. But again, join us next strong. We're gonna keep it going with Kama Sutra. Right. Let's go. Let's go. It's gonna be Kama Sutra. Yes.
And of course, if you're interested in being Anu and having the, and perhaps even doing this, please be sure you go to anulifeglobal.org and click on Anu Man or Anu Womb to apply.
And remember to Shima at
6:30.
6:30 p.m. Eastern.
Tomorrow. Yep.
Tomorrow. Right.
Yes.
Shima is tomorrow.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
So peace. Give thanks.
Shalom.
Shalom.